Hi everyone, welcome back to my videos, and today I have a guest appearance. This is my little boy Aiden. He is 7.5 weeks old, and today I'm going to talk to you about silent reflux. So just a little update on Aiden. He is a little bit clingy, hence why he's in the sling today. We are still breastfeeding and it's taking its toll a little bit now because I'm having to be up however many times during the night to feed him. So sleep is still a little bit on and off. During the week this week he went through 4 hours of sleep, then got up once and then another 4 hours of sleep. So he only got up once throughout the night, which was amazing. I woke up with a new lease of life. However, last night he got up 3 times between 9 and 6 a.m. and then was up for the day at 6 a.m. So excuse the little hoarse croaky voice that I've got. I'm a little bit tired today, but I suppose that's the reality of having a newborn and being a mum. You gotta roll with it sometimes. So as I said, we're going to talk to you about silent reflux today because we had it with our little girl and it first developed with her around 6 weeks old, and we really didn't take her off medication until she was over a year. So it had a huge impact on our lives, and we had to adjust a lot of things with her to make sure that she was comfortable, and I'm going to share some of those things with you today. So silent reflux is also known as laryngopharyngeal reflux, or LPR. I hope I said that right, and that's slightly different from the other type of reflux. Gastroesophageal reflux, or GERD as it's known, is the other type of reflux that babies can suffer from. So LPR is basically silent reflux, and what it does is it causes some of the acid that's in the stomach to reach to the back of the throat or the larynx, and that can cause sort of like squeakiness, as you can hear with him, and some coughing, and it can create some nastiness in the back of the throat basically. Or GERD means it only gets to the esophagus, it doesn't come all the way up. So you might find that the baby or the little one gets a little bit uncomfortable, but you don't get that kind of sore throat or coughing that you get with the LPR. So we started to suspect that my daughter had silent reflux around 6 weeks old because basically she would not stop screaming. We had a really bad time with her, and every time we put her down it was a screaming session. It was especially bad after feeding and before bed at night, so we couldn't put her down on her back at all without her screaming, and it would take hours for her to pass out. One specific night we were watching her as she was trying to get herself to sleep after screaming for a couple of hours, and we noticed that as she fell asleep she did a little hiccup and she coughed and she went and then started screaming all over again, and that's when we knew that something was going on inside that wasn't right and it was giving her pain. I would also notice things like every time I was around other babies or friends with babies, that they would just nicely put them down on the floor and they would do some wiggling and some cooing, and they wouldn't mind at all being on the floor looking up, whereas the moment I put Emily down she would start screaming almost immediately. So I went to the doctor a little bit fraught. I was in a bit of a mess because with no sleep and constant screaming baby, I was getting a little bit anxious, shall we say. And I went to the doctor and they advised me to start on her on something called baby Gaviscon, so to help with the reflux symptoms and to stop the acid from coming back up through the stomach, which is very common in babies because the stomach and the entry to the stomach hasn't quite developed enough to sort of properly close. So it's very common for acid to come up the esophagus again whilst that's developing. So we tried her on baby Gaviscon and it didn't work at all. Not only did it not work, but it then caused constipation for her, which then caused another wave of pain and complications. We also tried thicker formula. I was still breastfeeding at the time, but the doctor advised me to buy like a heavier, thicker formula to see if that would help, but Emily didn't take it. She didn't fancy it at all. She was really only getting used to the bottle, never mind formula and a different type of formula, or one that's is more difficult to drink and it tastes completely different to breast milk. So again, we tried that and it didn't really work, so we had to give up that quite quickly. So the doctor also advised me to go on a dairy-free diet, just in case Emily had an intolerance to dairy, and that's what might have been causing the stomach upsets, which then cause it to come up the esophagus. Apparently soya and dairy have some similar proteins, so babies can sometimes be allergic or have intolerance to both. So I decided to give up dairy and soya for the first year of her life, which was difficult, but actually it helped me lose loads of weight because I couldn't just pick up a biscuit or some cake like I would usually do for a bit of energy. Dairy and soya can actually the proteins can actually go through your breast milk, hence why mums often have to give up dairy or soya if an intolerance is suspected. So in this case, yeah, I had to give it up, which was a challenge, and I became a real label reader. But actually we discovered new ways of cooking and things like that. So eventually, after all of that, it still wasn't working, so we went back to the doctor, who then referred us to have an ultrasound on her tummy to see if there was any kind of reflux happening in the esophagus. So for that, we went into the hospital. The sonographer took a little ultrasound of Emily's tummy before she was fed. And then had a look, and then I had to go away, feed her, and then we had to come back and then see if there was a difference, and lo and behold, you could see the liquid shooting up her esophagus, which then proved that indeed she had reflux. So after the results of the ultrasound went to the doctor and we noticed that the symptoms weren't improving, we were prescribed Ranitidine, which is like an anti-acid, which was in liquid form, and we had a little syringe that we had to measure up the amount and give it to her twice a day to begin with, and eventually the idea was that we would wean her down to once a day and then wean her off it completely. Something that we had to ensure is to make sure that we gave her the right dose according to her weight, so we had to regularly calculate according to her weight and then make the right calculation to give her the right amount of ranitidine. I will pop it in the link below because that's really handy if you start ranitidine, liquid ranitidine for a little one, to make sure you get the right dose without having to go to the doctor each time. So the other things that we had to adjust our life around, not only just with my diet and giving her medication, which she ended up, as I said, taking for the first year of her life, was that we had to just make sure that she was always propped up in some way, because every time you lay her down it made the liquid spring up her esophagus and to the back of her throat, and that was causing her pain. The first thing we discovered that was really useful was baby wearing and the baby sling, as you can see. This one is by Bykay, B-Y-K-A-Y. We just purchased it, but there's lots out there. I'll put it in the link below just in case you would like to have a look. I honestly would pay 10 times the price that we did for this sling. It's been worth its weight in gold, because just by having the little one upright and close to me not only gave her comfort, but it helped me potter around the house and do things that I needed to do. One thing we also found really useful was the baby Bjorn bouncer. Again, it was a lifesaver because the seat is a lot more upright. It has different levels, so you can go lower if you want to, if the baby wants to sleep, but otherwise it's like a little chair, a little soft chair. Again, I'll pop a link to them below because I just found them invaluable. They were absolutely fantastic. And it meant that if we weren't wearing the baby, we were able to put her into this bouncer and she'd be kept upright, especially after feeds. The last thing I had to really monitor was the way I breastfed Emily, because the most common way of breastfeeding is sort of the cradle hold, where the baby is latched and sort of lying across your arm. And what I found is every time she fed, she would come off and have the hiccup with a cough because the liquid was hitting the back of her throat from jumping jumping back up again. So what I found really useful was something called the koala hold, and this was where the baby sat on my knee facing me and would breastfeed upright. So I would have to hold her head with my fingers and tucked under her arms, really support her as she sat on my knee facing me and feeding. Again, it kept her upright, so I would hold her in this position throughout the feed and hold her like it for about 10 minutes after. They do suggest to keep the baby upright for at least 30 minutes after a feed, just to make sure that it goes into the stomach and stays there without jumping back up again. So silent reflux is a really difficult thing to cope with when you've got a little newborn, especially if you're already tired and stressed and anxious. So what I suggest you do, if you have any doubt or whether it is silent reflux, or if you want to get further advice, then I advise you just note down the symptoms, when they happen, how they happen, as much as you can, in as much detail as you can. So if you do ever see a specialist or a GP, then at least you've got it all written down to give this information. They then might refer you for an ultrasound, as they did with me, or they might go straight for some medication if they feel that might be suitable. But I really suggest you get medical attention if you do think that this is a problem, because it's not good for the baby, it's not good for you if you are constantly stressed. So get help. So it's a little short video today in comparison to my other long ones. I hope you found it useful. These are just little tips from me that I found were really handy when dealing with silent reflux. As I said, all the links of the things that I've mentioned today are down below. If you'd like to leave a comment just to say these things worked, or if you want to ask any questions. So don't forget to also hit the subscribe button to follow our journey as Aiden gets bigger, and to also find out the helpful tips that I found when I was bringing up my daughter the first time round. And I'll see you next time. Bye.